Nostalgia is powerful. It can be a memory, a time, a place, an event, or a show that connected with our childhood, with the ability to evoke strong emotions. But where is the line between constructive reminiscing and idolizing the past? This particular novel covers the themes about the dark side of nostalgia. What is more, since nostalgia is inherently oriented towards simplicity and not complexity, we as human beings yearn for simpler times, unambiguous emptions, and stability. That is the messaging and building blocks to perhaps one of the greatest pieces of Doctor Who media ever published, and the first piece of Doctor Who by Mark Gatiss, a name familiar to both old and new, a real talent with the rare ability of being able to understand the complexities and mythos of Doctor Who and incorporating a more sinister and darker storyline synonymous with the Virgin books. I present to you Nightshade. This book here, this is the one to beat. It's been quite some time since I have read this Doctor Who novel, and I say, yes, it is undoubtedly one of the greatest Doctor Who novels ever, in my opinion, so yes, this review is going to be very, very positive, but that is not a surprise. I reviewed this way back in 2015, I think, so 10 years. Flippin' Nora. It's been that long. Let me tell you what I love about a story. I personally prefer darker stories than light-hearted ones, but I love a story that echoes a sense of dread, and that dread is more and more prominent the longer the book, the story, the audio goes on for, which leaves you apprehensive and a state of ambiguity where I don't know how the characters will get out of the situation, or if they do at all. I love stories that incorporate that level of apprehension. That is what I love about storytelling. I don't like just ultimate terror or anything like that. It's got to be subtle, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse as it progresses. I personally love that style of writing. And it explains my love for horror fan rot, because it's basically my introduction to what I love about storytelling. I'll get more apprehensive as the story goes along, filling the characters with a sense of dread. And yes, that is this book, Nightshade. Yes, Nightshade will most likely be my favourite book from the Virgin New Adventures. Top 5 at the very least. And I say that with pure confidence because I know what I like. And it just gets better and better and better and better. It's a strong contender to be, but it's going to be top 5 easy. So this is going to be a very positive review of Nightshade. So let's dive into the in-depth review of why Nightshade, I believe, is one of the best books in Doctor Who's media. Now, Nightshade is one of those books I recommend curious fans who are interested in the Wilderness Years. It is a shame, though, that Nightshade and Love and War and its build-up relies on arcs which are very hit and miss. But even though you don't have to, I believe reading Time Worm and Cat's Cradle would set up the tone in what Nightshade and Love and War conclude. It's not mandatory, I just personally feel that the build-up just adds more emphasis on the themes of Nightshade and Love and War. It just emphasises on the relationship of the Doctor and Ace and what was touched on, or what was supposed to be touched on, in season 26 onwards, when Doctor Who got cancelled, being questioned by Ace about his manipulative nature and how it creates distance and conflict between the two of them, testing their friendship, and Ace feeling alienated, somewhat betrayed, and left constantly out of the loop and simply a pawn on a chessboard. But I always like to think of it like this. Once you got through Time Worm and Cat's Cradle, not all the books are terrible in the arc. Just Genesis and Apocalypse is whatever. Genesis is the only real stinker in my opinion. Time's Crucible is such a flipping drag, but Warhead, yeah, it's good, and Witchmark was surprisingly underrated. So Exodus, Revelation, and Warhead, I would say, are decent Doctor Who books. I only consider one massive stinker and one massive drag, but when you get through them, you've been rewarded with potentially two of the best books from the New Adventures. Nightshade gets constantly raved about, and Love and War gets very high marks. Nightshade's prologue sequence begins with a reference the day the Doctor left Gallifrey with his granddaughter Susan, setting up the stage for the themes of nostalgia and having regrets for the past. We see that Gallifrey is a society built on being isolated, contained into a box in a world of stagnancy and metal, which was not the life the Doctor wanted, nor for Susan. The Doctor knew all too well about the corruption and evil within Gallifrey was something to be left behind and not for Susan to experience, but to live a life of adventure, travel and knowledge. Even so, while escaping Gallifrey, they still felt homesick and were longing for another place to call home, which opens the door to an unearthly child and the themes of nostalgia and clinging to the past with regret. But that wasn't the only reason why the Doctor left Gallifrey and the Time Lords behind. The show always referenced that the Doctor was afraid to go back, but he couldn't go back to face the Time Lords. But there were even more sinister and twisted secrets left a mystery of why the Doctor left on that day. Nightshade's prologue is a foreshadow to the 7th Doctor's final new adventure, Lumbarrow, the most infamous Doctor Who book in all of the show's history. Considering I'm very familiar with Nightshade, it's crazy how I'm just like picking up new things as I've read it again. Maybe I just forgot it or just didn't absorb it back in the day, but as I stated, Nightshade is one of those books after every experience, after every read, I just love the freaking thing even more. I have that weird relationship with the Daleks too. Climbed up at the ranking, just gone up and up and up. It started as a 7.5 out of 10 and it's nearly hitting a 9. For some reason, when I come back to it again, I just freaking appreciate it even more. Now, if your first experience was the novel adaptation by Big Finish, boy, the audio has nothing on the book. Literally nothing. Nothing at all. And I'm not sure your experience of the audio might potentially taint your view of the book. So I always read the book first before the audio novelization. Sorry, the audio adaptation. It's just the way I work. But yeah, the audio has nothing. Read the book. And if you haven't it's not a bad adaptation. It's just it has nothing on the book. Anyway, covering the themes about Nightshade. The dark side of nostalgia, clinging to the past, and how that can have negative consequences. And we see that effect with some of the residents of the village in Crook Marsham. First is Jack, a young man, who out the window sees a figure of a woman with long hair wearing red clothes. Jack feels a sense of familiarity. Someone he knows, and goes out without a second thought during a heavy rainstorm, with Lawrence questioning what has got into his head. Jack comes closer to the figure, finding out if it is his young wife, but when in the proximity of her, she slightly fades under the heavy rainfall. Jack can feel a thick cloud of darkness wrap around him, like he is cocooned into something not physically there, and slowly being consumed by the rainstorm. At the same time, we're introduced to Edmund Trevorvick, an actor and once who preferred live television but theatre, who is now retired. He played the role of Professor Nightshade, which, yes, was inspired by Quatermass. It also references Hammer Horror in this as well, so yeah, Mark Gatiss. you're getting brownie points from me. There's also an unreleased prelude featuring Edmund that was instead published in Doctor Who magazine. It wasn't featured in the novel, where Edmund gives his performance as Professor Nightshade, in which the character is worried about the missing rocket crew and concerned the fame of Professor Nightshade will be a faded memory and no one will remember. But with his show back on the air again, he feels a sense of happiness, nostalgia, and the past hit back to see his role again on screen. Slowly but surely, he begins to pick up on something else familiar. A rotten, putrid smell begins to hit him, and he hears the name Nightshade referenced over and over and over again with a twisted, subtle laugh. Creepy, terrifying, but that wasn't related to the cut section where it was in Doctor Who magazine. That was more of him playing Professor Nightshade, which I personally would have not cut that out, but that's not really the decision of the writer. That's probably just an editor, Peter Darvel Evans' decision, maybe, I'm guessing, not Mark Gatius's, but I like the idea of it, and yeah, it's only a short novel, I'm going to throw that in. Yes, I remember the villain being excellent in this novel. Personally wanted a little bit more, but I can live with it. I was still satisfied after my recent reading. The Sentience is a brilliant villain, brilliant monster, because the way it attacks people and uses trauma, grief and regret and forms up these psychological hallucinations to manipulate people. Yeah, I like it. Very Hammer horror. We also have some other characters like Lawrence, who is living through life of loss with his wife, which leaves him awfully susceptible. Then you have Vijay and Holly, who are the operators of the radio station building, which plays a very significant role in the novel, especially when it has flashback scenes connected to Crookmarsham Castle, which was destroyed, and then a radio station was built on top of it. It plays a very significant part of the novel. I'm not going to tell you how, connected with the Sentience, but it does have, not a lot, but it does have going back in time sequences in this novel. But talking about grief, emptiness, and regret, the Doctor feels like he's drifting aimlessly. His purpose in the universe being questioned. Is he truly doing good? The Doctor is irritable, quick to anger, impatient, all the telltale signs of depression. But the reason for his actions is questioning who he is. Does he have the right to play judge, jury, and sometimes executioner? Does he make things for better or for worse for others? And is this all just a front on the Doctor's real responsibilities? Ace questions these thoughts the Doctor is expressing and never wants to leave the Doctor. The Doctor doesn't think about abandoning Ace, but leaving the life of travelling aimlessly, to stop interfering and help solve what he believes are his real responsibilities. To go back to Gallifrey, to stop running, but to believe that Gallifrey is where he belongs, and that he's been taking the wrong actions, just escaping his past. But even though the Doctor knows that Gallifrey is full of corruption and bureaucracy that plagues the society, he at the same time feels nostalgia and warmth of the old life before he left. Yep, I love the character development. It's pretty melancholic and pretty, bleak. I don't believe it will be to everyone's taste, because it's like very cynical, melancholic, quite depressing in its tones, and that is definitely amplified when you read the previous novels. You just see it subtly being brought up. But here it's like slam, yeah, you're getting it right in your face. Some people in reviews do say that Nightshade is quite contrived in its writing, with the Doctor being so melancholic. Yeah, that's why I say that sometimes reading the previous novels, it feels like the build-up to these feelings and emotions feels a little bit more real, instead of being very contrived and just like, oh yeah, why is the Doctor so depressed? And why is he just feel like he's drifting aimlessly all the time? Why is he feeling that way? It might feel contrived to you, but yeah, that's why I go back to the previous novels. It was just build Nightshade up quite well. So no, it's not contrived. Maybe on its own, But I personally disagree with that point. Not only does Nightshade excel in the narrative it's creating, but its atmosphere is elite. It is elite level, like a thick cloud that surrounds the characters in the town of Crookmarsham. We're seeing all these characters suffer and experiencing these psychological phenomenons. Betty is one of the characters who we deeply care about, which Lawrence is doing his best to look after, even though he is facing a lot of grief and has no choice to send out his son Robin as the phone lines are dead and out of action. Robin plays a role in having a relationship and a connection with Ace, which definitely, well, it stings. That's all I will say. But it's not just the supporting characters facing these psychological phenomenons. Ace and the Doctor too have moments. Ace seems to be surrounded by these lights throwing her off. The monsters on the cover are depicted as 10 feet tall crab-like beings who are a master of stealth and using their environment to their advantage. A lot like the Rutons, in my opinion, where they play with their little bit more subtle, very cunning, and use the shadows and the environment to their advantage. They play on the phenomenon that when you see them in the corner of your eye, they quickly dash away, like something is passing your field of vision, a red flicker with their piercing red eyes, just providing enough presence to make the person feel nervous that something is there, but they can't confirm nor deny that they even saw anything, which they start doubting their own psyche, which again, it makes them more anxious. But yeah, I did talk about flashback sequences. Chapter 4 is basically one of those sequences going back to Crookmarsham Castle, which is then built up on a radio station. This one can feel a little bit padded. It's the only chapter, in my opinion, where I feel it is a little bit padded, but it actually does have important context to the story. It just goes on a little bit, but it is important. You have the scene of Cook, only used in this flashback scene, of him seeing his dead daughters in the distance, waving and smiling at him, while his crew, like Jackson, are screaming their heads off not to go any forward. It's one of the most terrifying sequences in the novel. I actually completely forgot this scene played out the way it did. It was utterly terrifying. To see that on screen as a Doctor Who story, my word, would that scare the living shit out of children. And wouldn't it have been awesome? You could, just to see these his own daughters just like shape-shift into like monstrosities and just something completely inhuman. Not even a monster, it's a hallucination. But to see it twist and morph into something which is just broken and decaying is like, imagine what Cook would even be going through to even witness that. And he's already facing grief at the loss of his daughters. Man, is that powerful and depressing. When you just hit the 100-page mark is where the book really picks up steam, and I mean really picks up steam. The scenes with Betty, who we understand faces these terrible dreams and everyone believes she is just sick, ill, is having another episode, but she is wide awake, or at least that's what we understand. These constant sounds of thuds, scratching, the creaking of stairs, water coming through the door, black horrible goo, with putrid rust-like smell and quiet laughter just coming through the doorway, to put Betty or its victims in a state of absolute terror. Bodies begin to form around the village and melt away upon investigation and discovery with the same putrid smell of rust. And Edmund Trevick is haunted and attacked by a familiar sighting that he faced in his role, but in real life. A massive cockroach-style monster attacks him. At the moment others come to see, it disappears into the night without a trace. Now, Nightshade actually reminds me of a Stephen King book. It reminds me of Under the Dome in many ways. Because you have an alien invasion story set in a town, and none of the residents can actually escape because it feels like there is a psychological barrier which prevents people from leaving. So they are connected to this town in some way, and their mind just refuses them to leave the town. We've seen examples of some of the characters trying to drive out of the town, and they're like having a psychological block by the sentience. So yeah, Mark Gatiss actually, in my opinion, did some form of Under the Dome before Under the Dome. Yeah, back in 2015, the review is no longer up now, it's actually unlisted, but you can find it in a playlist. I say that chapter 8 is my favourite chapter of the book. I'm not sure if I would stand by that now, but it is still terrifying what Edmund Trevorvick goes through, because the monster is, as in the monster from on the cover, is relentlessly chasing Edmund Trevorvick in the radio telescope building. Just relentlessly chasing him. He shoots it in the eye. It's injured, but it still persists and still chases him. It's like, it reminds me of the video game Amnesia, of the because the monster is just so relentless in chasing you and will just not give up no matter what. That's what that chapter reminds me of. It reminds me of the video game Amnesia. And this is where Edmund Trevorvick's past really does come to haunt him. Because now, in real life, he sees people he knows are now dead husks, relentlessly being pursued by a monster, ripping through highly reinforced blast doors, getting shot in the eye, and still trying to rip his head off. It emphasizes the battle he is facing. The chances of escape is slim to none. And what happens to Edmund Trevorvick? I will leave to you. But yeah, as I said, this book, very unpredictable of what happens to the supporting characters. You don't know if they will be killed, dead, the sentience consumes them. I'm not going to tell you any of that. But my favourite chapter now, I would say, involves Susan and the Doctor. It's just golden. It's so powerful, emotional, and depressing. The Doctor's seen as many as a person who battles all sorts of evil is now witnessed so vulnerable, in pain, and wanting to have a life of stability, purpose, but feels alone. Nightshade emphasizes how the past can hold us back, which affects our present time and destroys our future. The writing is, without a doubt, without question, exceptional. No doubt Mark's first Doctor Who piece is known to be his best work. In my opinion it is, because my word is it a special book. Out of all the new adventures and missing adventures currently reviewed, this is the best Doctor Who book I've read. Easy. And as stated in the start of the video, it might end up being the best Virgin New Adventure out of the lot. It's the one to beat, and from what I like out of a story, horror, apprehension, a sense of dread, bleak, foreboding, emotional, and powerful, it has it all. Without question, I will revisit it again in the future. Again, the final scene with the Doctor and Ace, the betrayal scene, oh, I'm very interested in how that sets up Love and War, of what can possibly go down, and how the Doctor resolves it. But yeah, it stings what happens, like the connection to Robin and Ace. But the epilogue scene, yeah, I really did like the epilogue, because I think it just closes the theme of nostalgia and clinging to the past very well. But I can't cover what happens in what's mentioned in the epilogue, because it'll give a lot of it away of what happens in the final chapter with the Doctor and Ace and Robin, so I can't say that. But yeah, really liked it, real powerful, and a good message in my opinion. My conclusion to Nightshade: it's a novel to beat. The book is a 10 out of 10 masterpiece in my opinion, one of the best pieces of Doctor Who fiction. And if I was to compare stories to this one, it's very much its own thing. I would compare it to Under the Dome from Stephen King in some aspects, and I would put Abominable Snowman for his atmosphere and villain. The Sentience very much gives me Great Intelligence vibes, focused on psychological manipulation. And Father's Day with its themes and based on the siege undertones. Nightshade is the novel to beat. What a freaking masterclass of a novel. Mark Gatiss, you flipping nailed it. Such a good book. I love revisiting Nightshade. It will stand as a test of time as one of the best books Doctor Who wise I've read. Yeah, period. Probably the best. If something beats it, I will generally be surprised because I know what I like. But Love and War gets a lot of damn praise too. So yeah, we'll see how Love and War stands. But I highly recommend Nightshade. I wouldn't really bother with the audio adaptation. It just doesn't do it as well. Get the book. It's not that expensive on eBay. I know some of the Virgin New Adventures can be, well, they can kill your bank account trying to even get one of them. But Nightshade is actually pretty decent to get. Like $7.99 on eBay. That's like on average, so you shouldn't have any problems getting Nightshade. Highly recommended. 10 out of 10 masterpiece. And yep, that is it. Thank you for watching my review of Nightshade.